In this video, we're going to wrap up the weather application. The goal here is to take the messages which are printing to the console and have them show up in the browser instead. And you could put them wherever you like. I'm going to put the messages just below the form. Now, what sort of messaging are we going to show? Well, if things go wrong, we'll show the error. If things go well, we'll show the location and the forecast. Now, the first step to getting this done is to give ourselves a place in the HTML document to actually put these messages, and to do that, we're going to create two new paragraphs over in index.hbs. Now, we could put these once again wherever we wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and put them just below the form, which makes sense. Right here, we'll set up paragraph 1, and then down below, we'll set up paragraph 2. So if things go wrong, the second paragraph will be empty and the first will contain the error message. If things go well, the first will contain the location and the second will contain the actual forecast. So now that we have the paragraphs set up, the goal is to target those inside of app.js. We want to select them much like we selected our form and our input, so we can manipulate them with JavaScript. In this case, we want to manipulate what text they're showing when certain pieces of JavaScript code run. Now, to get that done, we are going to use document.querySelector again. The problem is that so far we've just been selecting by the element's name, and that's not going to work for what we're doing here. So let's create a variable const called message1 for that first paragraph. I'm going to set up document.querySelector, and I'm going to try to select by the p name. Now, the problem is that querySelector matches the first element that matches whatever you provided. So this is going to be the first form, the first input, or the first paragraph. The first paragraph on the document is not what I'm trying to target. That's actually up here, and we don't want to change this message over time. I want to change the message for one of the paragraphs down below. To do this, what we're going to do is assign a unique ID to these two paragraphs using HTML. We'll then be able to target those two paragraphs by their unique ID over inside of app.js, giving a nice way for us to get exactly what we want. So setting up an ID is much like setting up a placeholder or class value right here. For the first paragraph, ID equals, then inside of quotes, we provide a unique ID. I'll use something like message-1. And the nice thing about IDs is that they're designed to be unique. So if I target message1 from JavaScript, I'm always going to get this paragraph. Next up, we'll create an ID for that second paragraph, ID equals message-2, and now we have a nice way to target that as well. Let's go ahead and get that done. Over inside of app.js, I'm going to change what I'm passing in to querySelector. Now, if we want to target by the element's name, we just type it out, like form or input or p. If we want to target by class, which we did already from CSS and which we can also do from JavaScript, we start with a dot followed by the class name that was chosen. In our case, we're trying to target by ID. That doesn't start with a dot, it starts with the pound sign. That's Shift 3 on your keyboard, followed by the ID value of the element. So in our case, we have message1 and message2 as those values for the message1 variable right here after the pound sign, message-1. Perfect. Now we have a way to actually target that, and down below we can change its contents. Right here, let's go ahead and do just that. Message1 is the paragraph element, and to change the text, we set the text content property. And we're going to set it equal to a string, the new text we want to have show up. In this case, let's go ahead and keep it empty for just the moment. What I'm going to do is save all of my files. I'm going to refresh the browser, and what do I see? I don't see anything new. Yes, I've added 2 new paragraphs, but they're empty, so nothing shows up. Now, we're going to make a small change to our code right here. I'm going to say something like from JavaScript. I'll save the file once again, and this time when I refresh the page, the JavaScript code is going to manipulate the value of the paragraph. And that's what we're trying to do in this file. We want to target those paragraphs, and we want to use text content to change what's showing up. We'll clear all of the messaging in the beginning. If things go wrong, we'll make sure to render that appropriately. And if things go well, we'll also, once again, make sure all of that data shows up by setting text content on the appropriate message. Now that you know how to set the text content for paragraphs, it's challenge time because that's really all we're going to end up doing. We're going to use this same feature quite a bit. So right here, I'll comment out this line, though I can leave it in place so you remember how to use it. And then down below, I'm going to paste in the challenge comments. So your goal is to render, not rendering, render content to those paragraphs. So we want to make sure that these messages get updated based off of what's happening inside of our submit callback function. So first up, you need to select the second message from JavaScript, just like we did with message 1 up above. You can add that code right here. Then down below, for step 2, just before fetch, you're going to render a loading message for the first paragraph, and you're going to leave the second one empty. You can just set it equal to an empty string to clear whatever value it might already have from a previous search. All of that is going to happen right here just before we fetch, but only if someone actually submits the form. That's when we show the loading message. Now there are 2 places we can go from there. Step 3, if there is an error, which means that this code runs, we want to set the first message equal to the error message. And if there is no error, we want to have the first paragraph set equal to the location and the second paragraph set equal to the forecast. Step 5, test your work. Search for invalid locations and you should see loading followed by the error message. Search for valid locations and you should see loading followed by the location and the forecast. All right, take as much time as you need to knock that out. Test your work, come back and click play. How'd you do? Let's get started with step number 1. Up above, I need to select that second message. So const message2 equals document.querySelector. And here we are indeed querying by ID. So I start with the #, message-2 is the ID value I set up over inside of index.hbs. It's sitting right here. Now from there, we can move on to step 2 of the challenge. Just before we fetch, we want to render a loading message for the first one and an empty paragraph for the second. So that could happen right here as an example. I could do it above where I create the location variable as well. Either way would work. Message 1 is going to have its text content property equal to some sort of loading message. You could have picked anything you wanted to. I'll just use something like loading ... though any other text content would have worked. And then for message 2, I'm going to set that text content equal to an empty string to clear any value that might have existed from a previous search. Now, step number 3, if there is an error, we want to render the error. That's going to happen right here. So instead of dumping it to the console, we'll render it in one of the paragraphs. That's going to be message1.textContent. And we are trying to render data.error. Excellent. Now we have step number 4. If there was no error, get the location and the forecast rendered. We're going to do that right inside of else. For message 1, we'll set the text content equal to data.location. We'll show that first. Then for message number 2, we'll go ahead and set the text content equal to data.forecast. So right here, the goal is to make sure we always render the correct thing to the paragraph. We start off with loading. If things go poorly, we render the error. If things go well, we render the useful information. And now I can remove the console.log calls, and we can go ahead and test our work. That is step number 5. I'm going to start by removing the challenge comments and that commented out text content example from up above. I'll make sure to save all of my files, and now we're going to test things inside of the browser. To start, I will refresh the page since we were running old code, and I'll start with an invalid search like an exclamation mark. If I search for that, what do I get? I could see that I got my loading message for maybe 1/10 of a second, then I got my error, unable to find location, try another search, which is fantastic. From here, we can try a valid location. I'll use something like Philadelphia. Once again, when I hit enter, we're going to see that loading message show up. And then right here, I can see my location, which is accurate, and I can see the forecast for the current conditions. Now, if I was to search again, we'll see that second message does get cleared because of the code we added right here. So once again, we'll just see loading. I'll search for something else, like Boston, hit enter, I can see just loading shows up. Then when the data comes back, the data is revealed. The only thing we're going to do to wrap up this video is to add a few styles to the application for that input and the button. Right now, they're just using the default styles, and we can write just a few lines of code to make things look a lot nicer. To do that, all we're going to do is add a few lines of code at the bottom of styles.css. We're going to target two things. We're going to target the input on our pages, and we're also going to target the buttons on our pages. Now, right now, we only use one input and one button, but the reason I'm styling in a general way by element name is so that if I do have other forms on the site, they all use the same set of styles and they all feel consistent. Right here for the input, I'm going to set the border and I'm going to add a little space for that border. And then we're going to set up three values. The width of the border, I'll use 1 pixel. The type of border, I don't want dashed, I want solid. And the color, we're going to use another hex code that is #CCC, which is a light gray. Now, from there, after the semicolon on the next line, I'm just going to set some padding. This is going to put some space between the text and the border. Right now, it's all crammed inside of that box. I'll use a value like 8 pixels for that. Before we move on to the button, let's go ahead and test these styles out. If I refresh things, it already looks a lot nicer. Now on to the button. For the button, we're going to set up 5 different styles, and we're going to start with the cursor property. Cursor allows us to customize the appearance of the cursor when we're hovering over it, and we want cursor pointer. So right now, before I save this file, if I hover over the button, the cursor doesn't change. But when we go ahead and save it and view it in a moment, we'll see the cursor will be that thing that signifies it's clickable. Next up, we are going to set the border and the background to the same color. So border, 1 pixel, solid, 888, after the hash sign, then a semicolon. After that, we're also going to set up the background property to the same color. So right here, 888. Perfect. The last one, the second to last one is going to be color, and we're going to set color equal to white. And then after that, we'll set up some padding here as well, and we'll use the same value, 8 pixels. Now let's go ahead and save things, refresh the browser, and see what we get. And right here, we have a nice search button. When I hover over it, I can see I do get that pointer, letting me know that it is something I can click. And if I was to run a search, I can see that everything is still working as expected. Good searches still work, errors still work, and there we go. We now have the final version of the weather application. To actually build this out, we covered a lot of new information. We explored Express, learning how we can serve up JSON and HTML. We then learned how we can use Express to serve up the contents of entire directories or work with templating engines. From there, we integrated our asynchronous code into Express, allowing us to fetch the forecast for an address right here inside of the browser. Now we have a nice little weather application. The problem is that it only works on our local machine at localhost 3000, which means that no one else is ever going to be able to view it. Before we continue on to the next application we're going to build, I want to spend the next section learning how we can deploy our Node applications live to production so anyone with an internet connection can access our app. I'm excited to get to that. Let's jump into the section intro for the next one. It's coming up now.